What happens when we stop needing answers? Yes, think about it. Would we feel completely lost or finally free? My name is Janis Rebekah, and this question became something personal for me in the year 2023. It was 3rd November 2023, the day that my grandfather fell sick. At first, it just felt like a regular fever. We thought he'd be fine, but then we got him to the hospital, and the doctor said that he must be admitted. But then everything changed when I learned that he would be needing oxygen support 24/7, even at home. That's when I felt my chest tighten with all kinds of questions and fears. Why is this happening now? What did that mean? I had lots of questions, but no answers. Finally, a week later, he was discharged. I thought we were past the worst. But as soon as we got him home and made him sit down, right in front of our eyes, he started losing his consciousness. Again, I had all sorts of questions. And before I could process it all, we were calling for an ambulance. Back to the hospital, more tests, more waiting. He regained his consciousness, but it did not feel like a relief. We felt like we fell into a loop of uncertainties. One day, he'd be fine. And the next day, he'd be in the ICU, hooked up with all kinds of machines. Foot tubes, oxygen ventilators, multiple needles on his body. One day, he'd talk to us, and there were moments when he would slip into unconsciousness, leaving us holding our breath, hoping that you'd come back. For months, our lives revolved around the hospital, and his condition swinging between hope and despair. The hardest part wasn't seeing him fight for his life. It was not knowing if he would recover, not knowing if he would ever come back home, not knowing what the next day would bring, not knowing if even there was a next day for him. But soon, the possibility of an end began to emerge. And it was something that we were never ready to face. The doctors told us that it was our decision to make. That was when I realized that some answers aren't given, they have to be faced. In those months of uncertainty, something shifted in me. Not suddenly, not in an instant, but slowly, painfully. I did not rely on answers because there just weren't any answers. That's when I started leaning on something else, trust. I started trusting that even if I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, I started trusting that God had a bigger plan than mine. In that moment, when I let go of my desperate need to figure things out, to understand what was going on, that's when I felt something that I did not feel in months. I felt a sense of peace, the peace in the not knowing. But life is full of uncertainties and twists and surprises. Do you agree with me? Because something happened in February 2024. Something that seemed impossible. Guess what? My grandfather came home. After months of asking, will he ever be able to come back home alive? He finally did, under a nurse care and still in oxygen support, but he came home. It felt like a miracle. But life doesn't follow a script, does it? In March 2024, he let go of this world. While it was heartbreaking for us, we found comfort in knowing that he was no longer suffering. Looking back now, I see what I couldn't realize then. That God wasn't providing us with answers. He was preparing us to face something that was inevitable, to find strength that we never knew we had. That's when I started asking this question. And it's also the title of my talk today, What Happens When We Really Stop Needing Answers? So let's explore why we humans crave answers. Since the beginning of the world, we are always curious about finding answers to all sorts of questions. How did life begin? What is the fundamental meaning of life? What's an atom, and etc.? Why? Because we feel like answers give us a sense of control and security. When we are faced with problems, what questions do we ask ourselves? How can I solve this problem? How soon can it be solved? We want answers to make sense of the chaos around us. But pause for a second and think, what happens when we stop needing answers? My friend, that's when you start finding a new sense of freedom. Firstly, this freedom to be curious. Questions no longer feel like they must be solved right away. Rather, they become as invitations for us to explore. Now, think about this. A kid asking stuff like, why is the sky blue? What's inside the clouds? Do you think that he or she really wants to know the answer? No, they just enjoy the process of wondering. But somehow, as we grow older, we tend to lose that kind of curiosity. We feel like our answers must have our questions must have clear, definite answers. And if we don't find them, we feel unsettled. But imagine if we could let go of that pressure to find out things. Instead, if we could navigate life just as a child, well, then life be so much easier because questions are meant to inspire us, not to burden us. And secondly, this freedom to be present. A few days ago, I had this conversation with two of my cousins. Both are in different stages of life. One is doing a postgraduate studies, the stage in life when everyone around you is constantly asking, what's next? What's your plan? Like she's supposed to figure out her life by next Tuesday. So I naturally joined the club and asked her, what's next? But instead of brushing off that question, she got all serious. She went in a deep, serious tone and said, will I figure this life out? Will I be brave? Will I be independent? Now, trust me when I tell you this, she was dead serious. Like she was doing a voiceover for some documentary film. But then I looked aside. There was my younger cousin who was 10 years younger. She's still living that carefree life, the snack-fueled carefree life. I looked at her and asked the same question. But she looked at me and said, Akka, vidunga appuram paathukalam. She said it with so much confidence, like she cracked the code to life. And my cousin and I couldn't help but laugh. And then we started talking about how we were just like her when we were kids. But somehow in between, life happened. Expectations, responsibilities sneaked up. And we went from, we'll figure it out, to what if we never figure it out. But too often, we are stuck in what's next, that we often to realize that the most important moment is to live in the present. Somehow, we traded that carefree confidence for constant overthinking. But maybe life, just maybe, wasn't meant to figure out all things, but to learn to live fully in the present. And thirdly, there's freedom to accept the unknown. Now, trust me, not all questions have answers, and that's okay. It's really okay. Because life is full of uncertainties, but in that uncertainties, we learn to trust ourselves, to trust others, to trust God, and to trust in the journey of life. Because here's the beauty. Now listen up. When we stop needing answers, we stop fighting with life, and we start flowing with it. We find joy in the journey, and not just in the destination. We find freedom in the questions, and peace in the not knowing. So my friends, if you are faced with uncertainties, I encourage you to pause, whether it's a decision or just the unpredictable flow of life. Don't feel the rush to solve questions right away. Let the questions linger. Allow them to sit with you. Pause for a moment. Because sometimes in that pause, in that quiet space, you might find new perspectives you haven't considered before. Because life is not just always about having all the answers. It's about learning to live fully with the questions. Life isn't always about having all the answers. It's about learning to live fully in the questions. So what happens when we stop needing answers? My friend, you do not lose control. You gain freedom. Freedom to live freely. Thank you.